I want to talk a little bit to start off with, just to talk about why you want this seat in the Senate. You know, don't have very much experience in this, but you're a small business owner. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, that's a good question, and the reason I'm running is I think about the great fortune I have to have been born in this country, to have the opportunity to live the American dream literally, from starting a business from scratch and building it up. And as I look at my grandchildren, I see that them and future generations may not have the same opportunity to live the American dream that I have. And that gives me great concern. And that's the reason, pure and simple. I'm not running to be a politician. I've had a very successful career. I'm doing this as a public servant.
I was checking out your website, saw some of the things that you're passionate about. Job creation is the top on there right now.
Sure.
Talk a little bit about what you would do as a senator to help create jobs in Virginia.
Well, I think, there's a concern there in terms of job creation, because everybody recognizes that there's a reduction in federal dollars. So we've got to find a way. As a business owner, I'd be very concerned if I had one customer that dominated as much of my income statement as does the revenue coming in from the federal government. We've got to find a way to replace that. I think the port offers the greatest opportunity to do that. And I'm not just talking about the container terminals. I'm talking about the whole estuary that is the Chesapeake Bay and Hampton Roads, all the way up in Yorktown. I've talked to delegates up in as far as West Point that are concerned and want to know if we can grow the commerce up there in terms of the paper mill. There's grain, there's lumber, there's other opportunities beyond just the container terminals down here in the lower end of the Hampton Roads Harbor.
I want to talk a little bit about education. That was something else that I was reading on your website that
Sure.
you're passionate about. Why should we take government out of the schools?
I just believe that the government, what challenges Norfolk City schools is different than challenges Northampton. The challenges in Matthews are different than Accomack, and thus and so throughout this Commonwealth and the state of other states in the United States. So I just feel that it needs to be local. As a business owner, I'm big on accountability. And I just think that the government needs to set the 30,000-foot basis for how they should operate. Then they should get out of the way, but hold the local educators and administrators accountable for the results they get. I think teachers need to be more involved in the education process. Teachers inspired me when I was in high school. That's what got me to where I'm at. They inspired me. They didn't force me to learn to take a test. They inspired me to learn on my own to be successful.
I wanted to talk a little bit about transportation, and especially the tunnel tolls here. We have so many people here in Hampton Roads that say they do not want these tolls. The Supreme Court says they're a user fee, they're not a toll. So what would you do about that?
Well, I believe we ended up with a bad contract, frankly. As a business owner, I'm not guaranteed a return on my investment. If my revenue drops off, I'm not going to have somebody replace that revenue with added income that comes in with tax dollars. So I think we need congestion relief. We need the tunnel needs to be put in. But while I was listening to what was going on with these tunnels, I was busy challenged with employees who lived on the other side. I'm challenged by my customers needing truck traffic, and they're going to be saddled with tolls. My customers' costs are going to go up as a result of these tolls. I think that therein lies the difference between me and the typical politician that may be running for office, is that I'm a business owner. So I look at perspectives. I'm a common sense, result-driven business owner who would look at this as a long-range plan rather than a quick knee-jerk reaction to congestion on Hampton Boulevard and across in Portsmouth and other places.
The Affordable Care Act has been a hot topic since its implementation a couple months ago. Recently, the governor of Kentucky was talking about how successful it's been in his state since they have followed through with everything they're supposed to with the Affordable Care Act. But you don't support that in Virginia. Can you talk a little bit about why?
Well, specific to the Affordable Care Act, I think it's an oxymoron of greatest potential. I just don't see anything affordable about it. As a business owner, I've been supplying insurance, health insurance to my employees for years. What I'm concerned about is a for-profit industry that has tax dollars from the federal government supplementing it. So they aren't addressing what's driving the expenses of health care in this country. Everybody's got to have health care. They really do. I mean, you can't afford to be without it. I've been supplying it to my employees. It runs into the hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, but they're not addressing what is really creating the cost of insurance in this country.
Thank you. I want to get into some of the big social issues. That's in Virginia. They're always popular to talk about. One of which is gay marriage and same-sex marriage. Right now there's a ban in Virginia, but recent polls have suggested that if we were to have another vote now, that Virginians would overturn that ban and would reinstate it. How do you feel about same-sex marriage?
Well, what I believe is traditional marriage. But as I knock on doors of people in the 6th District, that's the first time I've heard that question, because I have not heard it questioned as I knock on doors and make phone calls, hundreds of which have been made before my primary and now in the general election. I've not been asked that question. What's on the mind of the people in the 6th District are the economy, jobs, and concerns over education.
We have some big loopholes in Virginia as far as gun control background checks. You know, there was overwhelming support for universal background checks for gun owners. Do you support gun control in Virginia, and how do you think we should go about it?
What I feel is, again, I think that for political reasons, people aren't focused on the issue. I'm interested in people being safe, but further restricting law-abiding citizens isn't going to help, in my opinion, gun control, or to reduce the amount of violence. I see it as an issue that we need to address mental health. We need to get that straightened out. We need to, the reason people are criminals is they don't follow the law anyway. So I think to get it solved, we've got to address the problem that's creating the violence using guns. And once that's straightened out, I think a lot of the concerns that people have and the issues about violence with using guns will go away. We've seen violence, even with our senator recently, that a gun wasn't used in a violent way with him. He was stabbed. So people who have a mental health issue will find some vehicle to perpetrate their crime. It doesn't have to be with a gun.
Right. Talking about mental health, what do we need to do in Virginia to help those that do suffer from mental health issues?
Well, I think that's a very good question. We could sit here for a long time and talk about that, but I think what we have to do is we have to, I think the greater good of the citizens outweigh the concerns and interests of privacy with people that suffer from mental health. We need to be better at sharing information. My daughter had just gotten out of Virginia Tech when that tragedy occurred there. This gentleman had been identified as a real risk to the campus and to the teachers and to the students, but nothing was done. That information wasn't shared with the authorities in order to get him the help he needs before he killed many, many people unnecessarily, in my view.
One more thing, wanted to talk a little bit about women's health and abortion regulations. We have some strict abortion regulations here that not a lot of people support, some do support. Do you agree with the regulations that we have now?
I'm pro-life, but I have a company that far and away the majority of my employees are women. So I'm very, very familiar and hear it a lot from them and others. I have 2 daughters, my wife, so I'm very, very familiar with the needs of women, and I try to be sensitive to that. I think that though that as I go around the 6th again, I'm not hearing as much about abortion. If I say I'm pro-life, that kind of makes the question go away. And people, the next question on their mind is, what are you going to do to help the economy, improve the job market, and improve education in Virginia? I
want to talk a little bit about why people should vote for you instead of Delegate Lewis, to have you be the senator representing them in the General Assembly.
Well, I think I bring a fresh face. I bring 40 plus years in the maritime industry, in the business industry, 29 of which is starting a company from the ground, literally, mortgaging my house, taking that money as seed money with my mother and my wife assisting me. Now 29 years later, I'm in a position that I'm transitioning my company to my son, and with that, I want to give back. as a public servant. I don't need another career. I'm not looking for a career. So what distinguishes me is people who think that elected office is a career choice rather than an opportunity to give back. I remember our founding fathers in history when I was in school. They had an idea that you go and do something, you succeed at something, and you go to give back in a public servant. Then you came home and you planted your crops, you harvested your whatever you were dealing in as far as earning a living, and you went on about your life. It was a public service as a grateful citizen of this nation that we live in.
Thank you. And that's it from me. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about?
Well, I think that what I am is a common sense businessman rather than somebody who's chosen to be in politics as a career. And I think that's really the distinguishing factor. I've spent a career in building jobs, helping customers actually expand. I've seen faces of customers light up when they learned that 30 or 50% of their market share is overseas. And I help facilitate that through government entities here, the VEDP in Virginia, the VMA, Virginia Maritime Association, the Department of Commerce and others, to help them connect with customers overseas so that they reduce the risk, they level out the risks of economic upswings and downturns. So I think that's the perspective I bring, is a perspective of business, problem solving. If you can't solve problems as a businessman, you don't stay in business. And that's my distinguishing factor, I believe, with the candidate that I'm running against.